price of anything, like a car. In that price are wages, materials and machines and everything else, and these are the profits. So when you sell the car, part of the money is used to pay the wages of the workers, part of the money is used to replace the tools and equipment you use up, and part of the money goes to the profits paid out to the shareholders. So if you want to compete in the world, you got to get the price down so that people in the world will buy it. Well, you can get the price down by lowering the wages. Here in the United States, that seems to be the only thing anybody can think of. I have another idea. You'll never guess what it is. Leave the wages alone, cut the profit. Come on. Oh, here's how it would work. You go to the shareholders of General Motors or of anybody else, and you say, we have a national crisis, and I know you love your country, so for the next 5 years, you don't get any dividends. So we can cut the profits here because we're not going to pay you any dividend. And you managers who get big bonuses, you're not going to get that either. That takes another piece of the pie. And then, woo, now we're more competitive. We've become more competitive by not paying. By the way, we have the most bloated executive salaries in the world. We have enormous outlays for our top people, for the profits. We want to economize? Here's a way. Will that make us more competitive? You betcha. So when there's a movement to say, we must become more competitive, we have to lower the wages, stop! Lowering the wages is one way. Lowering this is another way. And which one it is that you take, that's a political question. That's a question of who's stronger. Are the workers going to make them be the way we become more competitive? Or are they going to be strong enough to stick it to them? The General Motors takeover by the United States did that. That's how that was done. Under the heading of national emergency, crisis, save General Motors. We did. We saved General Motors by making workers accept $14 an hour whose fathers had worked in that plant for 40 years, earning twice or three times that. They also got rid of their medical they did a whole bunch of things that are very bad for those workers there, very bad. And they accepted it because they were convinced there is no option. And the irony in the United States is there is no option. Your question's right. What is the option here? There is no mass movement. There's nowhere for these workers to go. Is there an AFL-CIO that will say, no, this is the, and really cross America with a big campaign, paid for properly, so on all television stations, this little economics lesson I gave you can be repeated, and everybody can understand, gee, we could sell a lot more cars if they were cheaper, and here's a way to make it cheaper. That the executive only gets 10 times what the average worker gets instead of 400.
Yes. Good.
Solves the problem. And who pays? Rich people pay. Which is a very old idea. But in the United States, it has been, and there's a wonderful German word, my first language is German, it's called begeistert. And the word begeistert in German is to be kind of overwhelmed. Does anyone help me, someone who speaks German? How would you translate begeistert? Nobody speaks German?
Amazed.
What? Amazed, yeah, amazed, flabbergasted, maybe that's it, flabbergasted. You're flabbergasted, but Americans could learn all this. It could be done. You could have a population, in a European class, in a European meeting like this, it is easier for these points to be made. It's not because Europeans are one whit smarter than Americans, not at all. They're just more used to thinking like this. They have 100 little moments in their life where this kind of point is made by Uncle Louie at a picnic, by a newspaper they pick up. Oh, really? Remember, in many European countries, if you have a family of more than 10 or 15 people, one of them's a communist. That's just the way it is. And if your uncle is a communist, you can't think that communists all have horns because Uncle Louie doesn't. And your attitude towards these things are different. And the world works, and the world appears to you in a different way. So yeah, the question is, in Europe, it's going to be made a real point. If we want decent wages, we want wages even a little higher. But gee, if the wages are higher, then the price will have to be higher. No, it won't. We can raise the wages, And that won't make the price go higher because we just won't let these people get as much as they got before. That way we'll have a same price and higher wages. Oh, here's even better. We'll raise the price, we'll raise the wages and we'll lower the price. And we'll really take it out of them. But that's the issue. That is the issue. European executives, by the way, do not get paid like the Americans. They don't. They get paid a lot. Don't cry for that. But they don't get paid. They don't get paid like Americans. And the Japanese, the same thing. They just don't. And that all started in the 70s and 80s. That wasn't always that way. It was an explosion of profits in the United States in the 70s and 80s that suddenly gave to the executives the chance to give themselves, to produce at the end of the 20th century the same kind of Gilded Age, it was called, at the end of the 19th century in the United States. The eras of the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and all those wild J.P. Morgan, those fantastic wealth accumulations that happened in those 25 years at the end of the 19th century. That's exactly what happened 100 years later. It's just they have different names. It's not Rockefeller and Carnegie, it's Gates and Buffett and those names. But it's the same phenomenon. They didn't make this happen. They were there at the right time. And they made this enormous. And by the way, as they boosted all that money, was there anyone around saying, gee, if you're giving yourself so much money, that's probably putting upward pressure on the price. You oughtn't to do that. That's damaging competitivity. Instead, this money was said to be appropriate to these executives because they were genius entrepreneurs.
Right.
Huh? What? What a wonderful idea. Then this becomes productive rather than damaging. Here's the argument the other way. You pay workers more, they have a greater incentive to learn, they have more resources with which to develop their skills, you give them a greater incentive to acquire the skills. So pay them more and they'll be more, by the way, the AFL-CIO says that. Higher, I have a colleague, you may have heard his name, Sam Bowles. Any of you heard of Sam Bowles? Radical economist, used to be well known. He was the radical black sheep of his family. His father was Chester Bowles, was the governor of Connecticut, the ambassador to India from the UN. But his son, Sam, was a radical. Even flirted with Marxism a couple times, and a friend of mine, I helped him flirt. So Sam was fond of writing technical articles in economics showing how, case after case, you raise wages, workers become more productive. Cool. Hello, if workers become more productive when you raise your wages, then you really ought to raise your wages because workers become more productive. You get more, whatever it is, out for an hour of a worker's work. That would make the price cheaper because you get more things. You can afford to lower the price. So, wow, pay the workers more and you become more competitive. Now, if Americans believed that, then there would be no opposition to a program of raising wage. But Americans believe if you raise the wage by some magical necessity, the price of something has to go up. That's not the case. Never has been. That's an ideological snow job that's been done that people think like that. Yeah?
Mainstream press here pretty much has been both downplaying and denigrating the impact of the worker response in Europe. And of course the banks there are powerful and there are people very interested in austerity there. Well, how do you think this is going to play out?
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, a word, allow me. Our press is extraordinary. 3.5, we'll see what's in the newspapers tomorrow. 3.5 million people in the streets of France today. That is an astonishing achievement. That's bigger than anything they did in May of '68. You'd have to go back to the Second World War and the resistance against the Nazis to get this kind of a French unity. The unity of all the trade unions, the unity of the Communist Party, the Anti-Capitalist Party, a dozen leftist parties, marching together against and unifying. It's extraordinary. My guess is the history of Europe is being transformed these months. You certainly see a left that has come literally together in a power. The right wing in Europe, you can barely find it now. It's there, but it is completely overwhelmed. by this. The right wing can't get out 1 million people to do anything. And it sure as hell can't get out 3.5 million, and it can't coordinate them across Europe. It couldn't begin to. It's taken 20 years to do that if they're lucky. So this is the moment of the left, emerging, unified, powerful. By the way, I didn't mention to you, Gallup poll, the equivalent of the Gallup poll in France, an independent corporation that polls, 71% of public opinion in France is behind these actions. Unheard of. Not only are they doing it, but the mass of people have not been bamboozled by the government. Just haven't been. They support, even when it means you can't get on the subway and you can't buy your food the way you normally do. I mean, no one's starving or anything, but it's disruptive. Doesn't matter. It's extraordinary. And I think, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it sure is suspicious that you have these historic experiences, and American media do not